Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Consumerism Podcast, where I, Alex McGee, am your host, and joined with me today is the lovely Sierra Thompson.
Hello.
And in this installment, we will be briefly touching on the long-lasting impacts of consumer culture on technology, media, and society. If you're interested in one of these topics in particular, I would highly suggest browsing the page devoted to that topic. In this podcast, I will play the pessimist, and Sierra will play the optimist.
That's right.
Alright, so let's get right into this. First question pertaining to technology. What is technology's role in consumer culture?
Technology is growing, and as it grows, more people can have the ability to buy different, like computers, phones, all this stuff, which helps people because it's easier for them to access stuff like homework because they, can do their homework online. And also with like phones, you could, where back then you'd have to send a letter and that would take I don't know, 5 days, maybe more. But nowadays you can literally just send an IM, instant message, and it's like automatic. And you can get something done so much quicker, saves so much time, which saves money in the long run, I think.
I would argue the other way around, that technology has impacted consumer culture. That the more technologically advanced we can become, the more things we make, the more things we manufacture, and then the more junk we end up accumulating. Like, we have a word for it, we call it spring cleaning, is when we get rid of all the junk that we bought ourselves over the winter. So we have a season dedicated to throwing away all the junk we've accumulated over the past half a year. And it just goes to show how consumer-centric our society has become. And just something as simple as the Keurig coffee pods, that's a technological advance, and they're also very waste heavy. You throw the entire thing away into the trash, and there's no real, it's all just gonna go into some landfill somewhere, or could go fall into the ocean somehow. So
it benefits people, but it's negative on the earth and
impacts the environment negatively. But in this podcast, we're going to be focusing more on the content portion of consumer culture, as in consuming creative content and the subsequent producing of the content. So for technology, I would argue, for your side, I'd say technology has helped the production of creative content, because before people would have to write letters and make screenplays and all this stuff by hand, and now there's less and less people doing it because the technology is that more advanced that they can make that much more content.
Yeah. Same with reading. Way back when, you'd have to pick up a book and read with the full book to understand a topic or anything, but nowadays you can just research something and it pops up right away.
Definitely. All right, next topic.
All right, now on to the second topic of media and consumer culture's impact on it.
Alright, so I argue that consumer culture has had a negative impact on media, in the sense that media has always been a sort of way to control the masses, something to keep the masses occupied. And for them to stay viable, they had to get advertisements. That's just how media works. They have to have commercials and advertisements and stuff like that. And the more advertisements they run, the more money they have and the more viable they become. So they have to sell products in order to get their information out, which I think has negative impact on society in general, because now, while we're getting this information from other people, we're also being sold things that we may or may not need and want. Not so much want, because there's technology out there now that curates that kind of stuff. Technology knows what we want, but the real thing is if we need it. And I would argue that the majority of the stuff that we're advertised by the media, we don't need. So
there's lots of stuff that we don't need, though, if you think about it. With media, I think that part of it is it's so so many people pay attention to media and different forms of media, like social media, and like if these people are, they're giving people jobs, they're bringing money, which brings money to taxes in the local economy, even the general economy, and I think it just helps the population. It might not be like the best, honestly, but I mean, I feel like in the long run it definitely can help people, but it also causes a lot of stir up and drama, definitely.
All right, finally, how is society as a whole affected by consumer culture?
So even though things, there's so much production and they've hit a stopping point, you can also be, things that have already been invented can be improved, like computers, TVs, phones, everything. And that's also a form of production, which is kind of cool because, it just makes us better, makes humans better in the long run. Like with, nature, like once things have been finished, it kind of gives you an opportunity to start something new and start to come up with new ideas and ways to make things cleaner, ways to make things better in general. So that's what I think is.
I argue that consumer culture has a long-lasting negative impact on modern society because how unbalanced the producer and consumer scale has become in modern society. I think it's sort of analogous to an economy that is only invested in one industry. It's more susceptible to crash because that one item controls the entire economy. So I think that it's sort of analogous to that we have so little amount of producers compared to the amount of consumers, and that any one of these major producers out there pretty much controls the entire creative content economy. So, which it's sort of like a content monopoly. Like these companies out here that are very large in the entertainment industry, like Disney and Netflix and Google, and just all these large entertainment companies have a large stake in the entertainment and creative content industry. And I think that it is following a dangerous path that we've seen in history of few playing the game of for many, and it usually ends up with the many being negatively affected, and either the few prosper or the few get off with zero consequences.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, but even though like they've produced so many things in the past and right now, like we've almost hit a stopping point in production, well, there's also like improvements that can be made to things that have already been invented, like computers, and like they just invented, what was it, face like recognition.
I totally agree on the technological aspect that I think consumer culture has had a positive impact on technology, and technology vice versa, because I mean in the past maybe people have been consuming technologies that were created that have been negative to either the environment or society. But I think now that we've sort of mastered these technologies, there's more room to improve them so that they're beneficial to the environment and to society in the long run. So I do agree with you that as far as technology goes, I think that society is better off, while consumer culture in and of itself is still sort of a societal version of greed, like the societal view of greed. So
Yeah, I could see that. Like, we want so much, even though it affects other, animals in the world and everything in negative ways, but we don't care because it doesn't affect us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you for listening to the Consumerism Podcast. This is Sierra and your host, Alex, signing off.